How to Build a Multi-Billion-Dollar Business in Africa from Scratch by Strive Masiyiwa. Compiled by Geoffrey Tengamba, being read to you by Arnold Rangakoramia. Chapter 14, Being Business-Minded. It does not matter what industry you are in or how well established it looks. Somewhere, there is someone working on something that will completely turn it upside down. I make it my business. One of the fastest growing businesses in the world today is a company called Uber. For those who do not know what Uber is, it is essentially a mobile application. That is a computer program using a cell phone, which makes it possible for you to call a taxi. Uber does not own any taxis or cars of its own. The app sends a message similar to an SMS to the nearest registered but independent Uber driver within your vicinity. The car will usually arrive at your location within 5 minutes. Whilst choosing one of these services, the owner of the car proudly told me that he was making a lot of money as the service brings him customers. Uber takes a commission and also does the billing. All he has to do is turn up. Then the driver added this: Uber has no assets, just some computer servers. Seeing that he was a smart entrepreneur, I then engaged him in a wider conversation about business. I asked him so many questions that he finally asked me, "Are you planning to set up a similar business in Africa?" Not really. I'm just business-minded. I make it my business to see the business side of any business. I then surprised him by telling him what I already knew about Uber. For instance, I told him that Uber is now valued at more than $40 billion. They are more valuable than Anglo American, which is one of the largest mining companies in the world. Imagine, a taxi hailing service is more valuable than Anglo, which has been around for more than 100 years, employs tens of thousands of people, and controls some of the largest deposits of diamonds, platinum, iron ore, and coal in the whole world. Do you think that is fair? The Uber driver asked. How can a company with no assets be worth more than a mining company that owns De Beers diamonds or Anglo platinum? Uber has no assets. They do not even own the cell phone network on which their services operate. Who would have imagined that someone can come along and change a service as simple as getting a taxi? $40 billion. As we neared the end of my journey, I suddenly asked my driver, who incidentally was an African from Ethiopia, "How does Facebook and Twitter make money?" "Through advertising," he shot back. "What does that mean?" I asked, laughing. "Not really sure, sir." I laughed some more, and as I got out of his car, I was still laughing. He looked bewildered by my response. Sadly, I did not have a chance to explain to him why I was laughing. He rushed to his next Uber client. I went my way, still laughing. Changing dispensations. I will never forget the first time we had to deal with BlackBerry when they produced their phone for the very first time. Our business model is quite simple, the sales executive said to us. We charge you $20 per customer per month, and you can charge on top of whatever you want. My chief marketing officer, who was dealing with them, was livid. "This is ridiculous. We have invested billions of dollars to build the network and to get to the customers. Now you waltz in here and tell us that you will get the lion's share of the revenue on each customer? How can anyone accept such an arrangement?" The BlackBerry guy smiled and said quietly, "It's a take it or leave it." The matter was escalated up to me as chairman. I listened quietly to our senior executives express their frustrations and indignation. "That means we will only be getting about $5 whilst they take 20. Is that fair? Why can't they just sell us phones like everyone else does? Why do they want a revenue share as though they were the operator?" "Do it, and do it now," I said quietly. Then I explained. They have the upper hand. They know that they have an iconic product which our top customers will want. If we do not sign, they can do serious damage to our business by handing this opportunity to a competitor. This game is no longer about building networks. It's the guys who can use our networks for their own businesses that will be king from now on. We better learn to do the same, or at least work with them. The position of BlackBerry would remain unchallenged until someone came along with a better product, and that was Apple. They were even more aggressive about what they wanted. There was no debate. We all understood by then. Today, Apple is worth more than $600 billion, making it the most valuable company in history. Yes, more valuable than any oil company or mining conglomerate or cell phone company. Being business-minded requires you to understand what I call changing dispensations when they occur. If you do not understand why Alibaba, an online flea market, is worth more than any cell phone company or any mining company, you will not be able to play the business game. Now think about Uber and learn to be business-minded. Change is coming to your business. Whenever I share a little story, my key objective is to help you extract one or two principles that you can apply when you find yourself in such a situation. For instance, I gave the story of BlackBerry. Until they came along, our business model as a mobile network operator was to buy phones in bulk as cheaply as possible and sell them to our customers. Our business was not to sell phones, but to get people to use them. Our business was airtime. Now here was a new manufacturer, BlackBerry, who did not want to just sell us phones, but wanted a share of the airtime revenue. Actually, they wanted the majority of the airtime revenue. I realized very quickly that they were not selling a phone, but a service. BlackBerry is not a phone. It is a phone used to access the internet. It was the first real smartphone. The game had changed. New dispensation. Companies like Nokia and Motorola, who had dominated the game until then, were in big trouble if they did not see this change in dispensation. Nokia failed to see this change and were taken to the cleaners. Giant companies like Ericsson of Sweden, Siemens of Germany shut down their cell phone manufacturing business and fled at others just became small-time players in an industry they had once dominated. Changing dispensation. I also realized at that point that we would have to change quickly and turn our attention to things like mobile money services. Now we would have to hire bankers and insurance people, even doctors. Yes, we have medical doctors developing products. This was a time when there was no Google, Twitter, Skype, Facebook, Alibaba, or WhatsApp. We would have to reach out to these new players and find ways to work with them or get rolled over. Extract a principle now. It does not matter what industry you are in or how well established it looks. Somewhere there is something working on something that will completely turn it upside down. Uber is changing the public transport industry of taxis. Amazon took on the distribution of books. Netflix and similar services will smash the traditional TV broadcasters and pay TV companies. Being business-minded is accepting this reality. It is something that should actually excite you. I get goose pimples. I love it. Another principle. In 1900, if a young man or woman went to the most successful person around and said, "What business should I be in to really be successful?" the answer would not be the same when asked in 2000, and it would not be the same if asked in 2050. These are different dispensations. You should not be dreaming of being a rural bus operator. It is not a business of your dispensation. There are new industries being developed every day at an ever-increasing pace. Uber, EcoCash, or M-Pesa are just the same. One of my young daughters, intrigued by what I said in my first post on being business-minded, asked me, "So how does a mobile money service like EcoCash or M-Pesa actually work?" "It just works like Uber," I replied. "How?" she asked, surprised. Like Uber, they use a very sophisticated software program to link up key partners in the transaction process. Uber relies on independent drivers who own cars and actually carry the people. Our mobile money service, EcoCash, relies on thousands of independent small businesses who handle the actual transactions. If you think about it, the principles used in these two systems are exactly the same. Uber works as a unique partnership with drivers. Mobile money transfer systems works as a unique partnership with thousands of small businesses. She stopped and reflected for a moment, then asked, "Do you think there are other partnerships out there that can use this Uber or EcoCash type of principle?" The opportunities are actually limitless. You just have to be business-minded to find them. Why don't you think of other services which could be developed using the same principle? Being business-minded is not just about creating new products or services, but sometimes it is about bringing disruptive new ideas to existing products and services. And if you come up with a great idea, be smart. Don't go telling the whole world on Facebook. Just do it. In my next post, I will tell you a remarkable story about a smart young lady called Chido who listened to me. Witty inventions. Proverbs chapter 8 verse 12. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence and find out knowledge of witty inventions. Chido is one of my Facebook fans. She reads every post and follows up with my afterthoughts, taking copious notes and extracting principles. One day she decided to visit her grandmother, who lived in a village about 400 kilometers from the capital city of her country. She would have to travel there by bus or catch a lift from someone going to the area. The challenge for her was that the bus could be very intermittent and never really followed a particular schedule, and for the guys with lifts, she was afraid she might get someone who could harm her. Anyway, she would have to brave it because that is the way it has always been. Only this time, as she sat in a rickety rural bus, she was thinking about something I had said in one of my posts. She was thinking about Uber. In her own research, she had discovered that the guy who set up Uber set it up because he could not get a taxi when he needed it. Why can't we Uberize rural transport? She asked herself. Imagine if I could get an SMS 30 minutes before and the bus was getting close to my village, instead of waiting all day. She had also read on the internet about the Uber carpool system, and she thought to herself, if the guys who offer others a lift were on the Uber-like system, I would have a better chance of vetting who gives me a lift and when they are available. Why doesn't some African entrepreneur come up with a system similar to Uber to solve our own transport problems? Surely it must be possible to adapt the software they use for our challenges here in Africa. Returning from visiting her grandmother, Chido had to wait almost the whole day by the side of the road trying to get a lift back to town. As usual, it was a harrowing experience for the young woman. Finally, she managed to squeeze herself into the back of a truck driven by a drunkard who almost killed them. The following day, she called a young friend whom she often met at the internet cafe, and she asked him a question. James, you know how to write in code, don't you? I have internet friends all over Africa and even as far as India who could help us develop something like this. It's actually not that difficult, James declared confidently. The two of them reached out to some internet friends using social media and began to develop their idea. Very soon, they had a company with partners in Nigeria, Kenya, India, America. When their company listed on the New York Stock Exchange a few years later, they were richer than Aliko Dangote. Principle. Chido and James do not have to be imaginary characters. They are young people across the entire world who have skills to solve this kind of problems and many others like them. They do not need to buy buses or to get into businesses, but they will end up making more money than any bus operator in history. They will be able to get into businesses with far less capital than I needed. Be business conscious, be business minded. This is your dispensation. So who is making the money? A friend of mine in South Africa wanted me to join him in acquiring a business called a feeding lot. Something he said intrigued me. They have 50,000 cattle on one farm. Did you say 50,000 cattle? Wow, I have never seen that many cattle in one place. I have to see this, I exclaimed with excitement. Having walked around the farm and seeing all these cattle feeding in one place was pretty cool for a city slicker like me. It would be great to have the bragging rights of saying I have 50,000 cattle. I could just see how they would react back in my village in Zimbabwe. But before I got carried away, I had to look at the numbers. And when I look at numbers, I look at numbers. How do they make money and how much? Let me get this, I asked the managing director of the operation. You buy the cattle from other farmers, then you feed them, then you sell them to the guy who slaughters them and he sells them to the supermarkets? Yes. Interesting. So who makes the money? It's an industry. Tell me about this industry. I want to know everything about it. The management were professional and passionate about their business. It was very clear they had been in it all their lives. Most of them had specialized agriculture degrees and MBAs. The more they spoke, the more I realized how sophisticated it all was. There is a silence to everything. Now, the guy was talking about the type of cattle they use, how they get the cattle to put on the weight quickly, disease control, competitors from Brazil. Wow, they do all that? Yes. I see. I wondered what the conversation with the professional farmer would have sounded like, or for that matter, the abattoir operator or the buyer at the supermarket chain. Respect. Being business-minded requires you to always approach things with humility and respect. There is nothing out there that is simple. Only fools look at what someone else is doing and say to themselves, that is simple. The process of reviewing their financial statements and business operations took me several months working with industry consultants. It was harder than a telecommunications business. I decided not to buy the business, although I would have gladly invested for a minority stake on condition that they stayed to run it. Understanding this distinction will prepare you for the senior class of business-minded people. End of chapter 14.